And we are back once again. One more episode of the Horror Guys.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Brian.
And we're going to talk about horror movies this week.
I recently read that, most podcasts stop after the third episode.
Third episode.
So that like 90% don't have more than 3 episodes.
And this is number 187.
We are the 1%.
We are the 1%.
One of these days,
now, if we could just
we'll get it right.
translate into that financially, being in the 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow that needs to cross over. If you buy all our books.
You could buy all our books 100 times over and we wouldn't get that much.
Probably wouldn't be the 1%.
But you could buy our books over at horrorguys.com/books.
Because we are our own sponsor.
We've got the Horror Guys Guides to the films of Vincent Price. The Horror Guys Guide to Shock Theater. The Horror Guys Guide to Hammer Films.
And we got some short fiction collections.
We've got Tales to Make You Shiver, Volume 1. Tales to Make You Shiver, Volume 2.
And Volume 3 is about half written.
Your half. And we've got even stage plays on there. A Sextet of Strange Stagings. Kevin's book of...
plays.
One of them's
Short
a ghost
plays.
story.
Yeah, There's a little horror in there.
It's a little bit.
And weirdness.
Yeah.
But what did we see this week?
Oh, we could talk about books all day, couldn't we?
No.
Okay. Well, stop on in over at horrorguys.com/books or horrorguys.com/monthly and pick up our monthly horror magazine, which includes all our reviews, everything from the podcast, everything from the weekly newsletter, our bonus newsletter, our bonus reviews, and anything else that comes up.
And that's a heck of a lot of movies we've seen.
Yeah, 30-something every month. What do we got this week?
Well, we got a mystery at the
Easy for you to say.
Mystery. See, I got the
There's no
title
whistling
jumbled.
at the Whistling Museum, no.
It's The Mystery of the Wax Museum.
Oh.
From 1933.
Ooh, an oldie. Is it silent?
No, there's talkies.
Oh,
There's
okay then.
talkiness in it. And The Blob from 1958.
Beware of the blob, it brought the worst theme song you've ever heard.
It's got a song.
It's stuck in my head, and it's been
sticks to
3
ya.
weeks now. Blob, blob, blob. Okay, what else?
An African horror movie, which we don't see those very often. Saloum from 2021, new to us. And The Retaliators from 2021.
Also just
Very new.
released.
Just
That one
released.
really did just release. Saloum, I think, has been out for a year or so, just not in
Yes.
this country.
Just
Retaliators
catching up
just
to the
released.
United States with the Retaliators. Yeah, that's fresh and new, and that's indie-ish. Has a. It's not quite indie. It's one of those tweeners almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and over on horrorbulletin.com for our weekly bonus newsletter, this week we've got just King of Thorn, an anime from 2009. What happens if there's a plague and 160 people were chosen to be frozen in cryogenic sleep.
It was a low number of people.
It was surprisingly low
considering the
yeah.
money and resources they put into that facility. It was that's it. That's all.
And the screening process they used to choose the characters that got frozen is maybe the worst choices ever.
Yeah.
But we'll let you watch that or read the review and find out. We also watched the movie Them, the very first giant bug thriller from way back in 1954.
Radiation is scary.
Yeah, giant ants. What's scarier than a giant ant?
Flying giant ants.
Oh, they got them too. Yeah. All right, well, our real first movie this week is...
Mystery of the Wax Museum.
Not to be confused with Terror of the Wax Museum, or House of Wax, or Waxworks, or... there's a lot of Wax Museum movies.
But this is where it all began, wasn't it?
Well, there was a silent one that I believe
that's
was
right.
Waxworks,
Didn't-
which you could read about in the Horror Guy's Guide to the Age of Silent Film. Smooth, that one.
Smooth transition there.
But yeah, this was, I think,
Anyway,
the first
this was
talking
the early
one, though.
Yeah. And later, Vincent Price was starred in a
House of
remake
Wax.
of this, House of Wax, that was a big 3D big deal, and that was a huge hit.
Full color, 3D, and I think it was the first really successful 3D film. Yeah. And it was, of course, it was very good.
Yeah, it was.
This one, however, came long before that, 20-something years earlier, and it is black and white. It's not 3D. It does have sound. It's not that old, but this one came first. Directed by Michael Curtis, written by Don Mullally, Carl Erickson, and Charles Belden. Stars Lionel Atwill, who's been in how many horror films of this era?
Lots of them.
Fay Wray, who's also starting to stack up a body count here.
She was a pretty good scream queen there.
Oh, yeah. And Glenda Farrell, hour and 17 minutes. If you're not sure which Wax Museum movie we're talking about, there is a trailer on YouTube. Spoiler free. I mean, it's only like 91 years, but if you haven't seen it, years before the groundbreaking 3D thriller with Vincent Price, there was this original. It's good and entertaining. We watched the nice-looking restored version. Yeah, it's really old, but it's been cleaned up a lot.
They did a nice job with that.
It's pretty dated, which adds to the charm. The direction and cinematography are excellent, and it's definitely worth a watch.
Yes, it is.
I would recommend this one and House of Wax. They're both very good. It's the same story, almost.
Pretty much,
but
yeah.
they're
Close.
both different enough to make it interesting.
Yeah, I thought so.
What happens?
Well, in 1921 London, we begin at a wax museum. Vincent Price, Lionel Atwill is at work on a new statue for the museum. Ivan Igor, the artist, goes to the door and lets in a stranger, Mr. Galatalin. Galatalin, thank you.
It's a very strange name.
Galatalin.
Probably
yes.
not as strange as Ivan Igor, though.
Ivan Igor. Ivan shows a few of the features of the museum, and the two visitors compliment his work. His greatest work is Marie Antoinette. Galatalin wants to submit Ivan's work to the Royal Academy upon his return. He's so impressed. Well, as the two men leave, a creepy stranger waits outside. This man is Worth, who is Ivan's business partner, who complains about expenses and financial losses.
Nobody wants to pay to see wax dummies.
No. Well, neither of them has a penny left, but they do have fire insurance. Burning the place down will get all their money back. Ivan is horrified at this and doesn't want to see his work destroyed, and he refuses. He's a little eccentric and maybe almost crazy, kind of referring to the statues as his children and talking to them like they're real and alive. Well, Worth starts the fire anyway in the middle of their discussion, and Marie Antoinette is the first to burn.
She's hot.
The two men struggle and fight as the fire spreads. Ivan is left behind to burn to death as Worth flees. Well, time passes. It's now New Year's Eve, 1933, and the party is in full swing. And, it's clever how they did that. I mean, the actual New Year's Eve celebration could not make it any more obvious that it's New Year's, 1933.
What time is it?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's around midnight. Well, we see that Ivan is actually alive, a little older looking, and in a wheelchair with gnarled hands. The police load a dead body onto a wagon and cart it away. The newspaper later reports that beautiful actress Joan Gale was declared a suicide. Well, later at the morgue, a disfigured man comes in on a table disguised as a corpse. He checks out the dead bodies until he finds the one he wants, Joan Gale. Little body snatching going on here. He ties a rope around her waist and lowers her out the window to his waiting accomplices.
Good thing she's a stiff. She went out that window like a load of logs.
Yes. Well, at the newspaper, Florence gets fired. Editor Jimmy says she can save herself if she gets a new story for the next edition. She gets a tip from a cop that Joan's husband, George Winton, may have murdered her. Well, Florence goes to see George in the jail, and he knows nothing about the missing body. In fact, 8 bodies have gone missing in the past 18 months. And Florence, she's thinking there's a connection. There's a story there. She's cooking. She's got that reporter instinct.
She's a very smart 1933 female reporter, which I don't know if they even had women reporters back then, but
I don't know.
it was kind of feminist looking, leaning.
Yeah. And she's very smart, very brassy, very forward, very, I don't know,
Have you ever described a
modern.
man as brassy? Oh,
Yes.
I got you there.
Yes, I think I have, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you know what I mean. Yeah. She's outspoken and, not a shy girl at all.
No.
Yeah. Well, there's a new wax museum opening in town. Ralph Burton is a young sculptor, but he isn't very good at it in his new boss's eyes. And his deaf assistant isn't much better. The boss's hands are disfigured. This is the Ivan guy, yeah. And he's bitter about not being able to sculpt himself anymore. Plus, there's the wheelchair. And the boss, of course, is Ivan Igor. They get a delivery from Professor Darcy. It's a new figure. It's a new Joan of Arc. And this Ivan guy just is the worst berating boss. He just would be...
You can't do anything
He'd
right.
be hell to work for, yeah.
I used to be 10 times the artist you are.
Yeah. Ralph calls his girlfriend Charlotte to lunch. Charlotte's roommate is Florence. George Winton is released from jail. Florence sneaks into the museum and sees them setting up the statues. Tonight is the grand opening. George comes in. His father has financed the museum, so that all these characters are all connected.
They always are.
Mm-hmm. When Ivan Igor sees Charlotte, he immediately recognizes his new Marie Antoinette. What a coincidence. He asks if she'd like to pose for one of his sculptors. Yeah, well, he doesn't do it himself.
Yeah.
He has surrogates do it for him now.
Well, that's the story.
That's the story. Florence goes back to the office and wants to see the photos of Joan Gale, the actress. She looks just like the museum's version of Joan of Arc. What a coincidence. And the body's missing. Florence thinks they may have made a death mask after stealing Joan's body. Her boss, Jim, thinks she's nuts.
That would be bad enough. I mean, you steal a body and just to, make a copy of their face.
Yes.
It could be worse, though.
It is worse, yeah. Spoiler, it's worse. At the opening, Ivan explains how many of his statues are recreations of his old works. He's hired young sculptors to do the work since his hands are ruined. The shady Professor Darcy recognizes someone and tells Ivan. Florence checks out the Joan statue again. A little closer look at it. Ivan says that Darcy created the Joan of Arc statue under his direction. And we see that Darcy has a connection with Mr. Worth, who is also still alive. For now. Because Ivan has spotted him.
Yeah.
And he's PO'd. Well, Florence sneaks back into the museum after closing time, and she sees a disfigured man working down there. She comes out and tells George and the police that the Joan statue is really Joan Gale. Joan.
They're both Joan.
Yes, they
That's
are.
how you figured it out.
Yes. Well, plus she chips away a little of the wax on the foot, and there's
A real toe
a toe
underneath.
under there, yeah. She describes the man from the basement, but the cops are kind of skeptical. They go into the basement and open a box. Inside, they find bunches of alcohol bottles, because it's Prohibition time, and this is And I thought this was a weird scene. Because Prohibition is supposed to be illegal. It is illegal.
I think it was more played for laughs. Look, there's a dead body in the box. Oh, it's not a dead body in the box. It's a bottles of booze. Let's all have a party.
And it's cops. And they're all like talking, oh, yeah, we got it from this bootlegger. And, oh, yeah, he's the bootlegger guy. And they know who the bootlegger is. And here's this illegal alcohol. And like, well, yeah, we'll just go upstairs now. And Florence is there scooping up bottles and saying, this is my fee. I'm taking these.
I think a lot of cops weren't really all that supportive of the rules.
I think so. But, boy, I mean, could they be any more blatant about it?
Again, it was also mostly played for laughs in the scene.
I just thought it was a weird scene, yeah. Well, they find the booze. They catch Darcy, who incriminates the bootlegger Worth, and he's in the business now. And they all leave, but at least Florence snags a few bottles. Darcy has Judge Ramsey's watch on him. The judge went missing several months ago.
He was one of those ones that went missing in the past.
Yep. Well, later we see the disfigured man carrying a body into the lair with a giant vat of boiling wax in the center. And you just know somebody's going to end up falling in that by the end of the movie. Whenever they have a big open vat of anything, that's how that works.
Always works that way.
Yeah. Well, Darcy is an addict. He starts going through withdrawal, and the cops know it's just a matter of time before he spills the beans. Where'd you get that watch? Who are you working for? What you been doing? They're really pressing him hard, and he's getting the sweats. So, well, Charlotte goes to the museum looking for Ralph. She runs into the mute Hugo instead. He was the other sculptor working for Ivan that we mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Yeah. Ivan sends her downstairs to find Ralph, but she ends up locked in down there. Ivan soon follows after and shows her his secret waxwork factory. He stands up and grabs her, so she screams, and seems he was faking that whole wheelchair thing.
No.
Yep.
Say it ain't so.
It is so.
Okay.
Yep. Well, Florence arrives at the museum, but George is delayed. Ralph arrives, lets Florence inside. She figures out that the statue of Voltaire is really the missing judge. Darcy confirms all this to the police. Meanwhile, the whole place is a morgue, shouts Darcy, utterly, spilling the beans, just completely.
Strange what heroin withdrawal will do for you.
It sure did for him, yeah. Charlotte fights back against Ivan and tears his wax face off. It's a disguise, revealing the deformed man underneath. He was wearing a phony face.
And if you see the 1958 House of Wax with Vincent Price, it's almost exactly the same face.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Uh-huh. The ugly man is Ivan's real appearance. Ivan opens up a box, revealing Worth's dead body.
Revenge.
Mm-hmm. Ralph and Ivan fight, and Ivan knocks out the other man. Then Ivan wheels Charlotte over to the wax pouring machine, one with a complicated system, so there's a nice suspenseful chance to rescue her in time.
Watch this wax slowly move toward the spout.
Mm-hmm. Slowly fill up the chamber and slowly go down. Upstairs, Florence arrives with George and the police to help, but they can't get in. Well, the police break in, chase Ivan around until they shoot him, and sure enough, he falls into the wax tub. Sinks out of sight.
Didn't see that coming.
Ralph pulls Charlotte out from the wax just in time. Later, Florence gets the biggest scoop of her career, and Jim, the editor, suddenly wants to marry Florence. I mean, there were hints of that, but,
Not really.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were beating around the bush about it.
A woman needed a happy ending, so she had to get married.
That's how things
I think that's how it worked.
That's
yeah.
how things were at that time.
Well, we watched the restored, sorta color 2019 version of this one.
Yeah, it was like pseudo color.
Yeah, they had, I think, red and green were the only colors they were able to. It was tinted. It wasn't really color. Mm-hmm. But between the red and the green and the shades.
And it kind of fooled the eye a lot.
Yeah, you would see things like blue, but there really was no blue there.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It's not as good as color, but it was interesting and well done.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematography is interesting, with lots of shadows and expressionistic weird angles. The film only consists of red and green shades, but you'd really barely notice it. It's very dated and also a little ahead of its time. The main protagonist turns out to be the annoying, brash Florence who figured out everything eventually on her own. Of course, in the end, she has to marry the editor, because that's what women did in the 30s. Even Ivan Igor doesn't hide the fact that he's the same sculptor from London. In the remake, Vincent Price pretended to be someone else after his rebirth. So yeah, in the 58, the Price character died, and then later he was pretending to be someone else in the future.
And he didn't actually die.
This one here is no secret that it's the same guy.
Yeah.
He didn't pretend.
Yeah.
All right, what next?
The Blob from 1958.
The Blob. I'm not going to sing it again.
Don't sing the theme
I had
song.
that thing in my... We watched this like 2 weeks ago, and I've had that stupid theme song in my head ever since. So if you watch this, skip the credits, please.
Beware of the song.
1958's The Blob, directed by Irvin S. Yeworth Jr., Russell S. Doughton Jr., written by Theodore Simonson, Kay Lineker, and Irvine H. Milgate, stars Steve McQueen.
Some of his earliest work.
Was it really, though? He was like 26 or 27 playing a teenager.
Okay, some of his early work.
Yeah. Anita Corso and Earl Rowe, hour 26 minutes. Spoiler free, what happens?
It's a little dated and kind of talky in some places, but faults aside, it was kind of groundbreaking for the time with the special effects. The monster makes the movie, and overall it's pretty good and unsettling.
Those are like 64 years ago.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in color.
Yes, it is.
Yep. Credits roll over the funky, saxophone-laden Beware of the Blob song. No, I'm not going to do it.
And they did that to lessen the scares. The studio was concerned that the movie was going to be so upsetting and so unsettling to people. It's like this happy, if you've ever seen some of the classic beach songs, beach movies from that era.
Yes.
It's along
very
those lines.
50s. Very 50s.
Very upbeat, very silly song. Very out of character for the horror movie.
Well, it said they did the... Okay, yeah. Steve and Jane are making out in the park, and they're the oldest high schoolers you've ever seen. I think Steve McQueen was 27 here. Mm-hmm. Actually, we just finished watching Carrie,
Mm-hmm.
and Sissy Spacek was 27 when she played a high schooler.
I don't think any of them people were actual teenagers, but especially her, yeah, as the lead character. But she pulled it off.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about that.
We'll be talking about that
in a
soon.
while.
Yeah.
Well, she thinks she's the latest in a long line of his hot conquests, but he says she's his first. Before that goes anywhere, a meteorite crashes nearby. Not too far away, an old man hears the crash as well, and he goes to investigate. He finds it and pokes it with a stick to find that it's got gooey filling inside. The goop gets stuck on the stick, and before he realizes what's happening, it gets stuck on his hand as well. Well, the old man runs off, screaming, before Steve and Jane arrive. They don't see anything. The old man flags them down and says to take him to town for a doctor. Dr. Hallen is just about to leave town for the weekend when they arrive. They unwrap his hand, but by this point the hand has melted away and the blob has gotten bigger. On the way out of the doctor's office, 3 teens challenge him to a drag race, but his trick backfires when the local cop, Lieutenant Dave, you know you got a big town when you talk to Lieutenant Dave.
Lieutenant Dave, yeah.
Yeah, he shows up. They talk their way out of trouble, but his 3 friends follow along to help. Steve and his buddies then find the meteorite, but it's basically just a warm rock at this stage. All the gooey filling is gone.
Mm-hmm.
They also find the old man's house and little dog, which Jane takes along. Back at the doctor's office, the man with the blob hand has passed out, but something's moving under the blanket. The doctor calls in Kate the nurse, but by the time the nurse arrives, the man is gone, and there's nothing but a rolling blob of goo. After the goo eats Kate, the doctor shoots it to no effect. Bulletproof goo.
Mm-hmm. Just laughs at the bullets.
Steve arrives back at the doctor's just in time to watch the doctor die. Steve then goes to the police and runs into Dave and the other cops who don't really believe him. Dave thinks it's all just a silly teenage prank, and when they finally get Dave to visit the place, the doctor's office is wrecked, but there's no bodies. The cops are still skeptical, but the landlady wants to clean up and at least dust around the fingerprints.
And it's said that there's some lost footage, that the doctor's death was a lot more graphic.
Yeah, they took it out.
And they took it out because it was too horrifying for the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, a couple of mechanics work on a car in their garage. One leaves the other under the car being worked on, not seeing the oozy blob sliding toward him. Lieutenant Dave called Jane and Steve's parents, who take them home. They both promptly sneak right back out again. Steve starts to doubt what he already saw, but Jane supports him. She knows he wouldn't make that up. She hasn't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Steve and Jane then go to the movie theater to pick up his 3 friends, and there's 80 cents they'll never get back.
Wow.
80 cents to see the movie, and I think it was a double feature.
Mm-hmm.
He tells them then that he saw a monster kill Dr. Hallen, and that they need to find the creature. The kids go through the town warning people about monsters, and that goes about how you'd expect.
Until
Steve goes into the apparently deserted grocery store, and they find the blob inside. They can't get out the back door, so they end up hiding in the meat cooler. The blob starts to come in under the door, but then it changes its mind and leaves them. Wonder what that was about. Steve gives Tony a dime to call the police and come to the grocery store. 80 cents for a movie, 10 cents for the phone.
Mm-hmm.
These were different times.
These were different times, and plus it was a payphone out in public.
What's a payphone?
Yeah.
The cop who answers the phone thinks it's a prank also. Steve insists that they have to wake up the entire town, but Sergeant Burt of the police thinks it's all a conspiracy. The kids drive through town, blasting their car horns to wake up everyone, and then the air raid siren goes off. A huge crowd arrives in front of the grocery, where Steve relays what's going on. The police disperse the crowd, except we see that the blob isn't in the grocery anymore. It's moved to the town's movie theater, where it oozes into the projection booth. Just as they figure out the monster's not in the grocery, there's a mass stampede out of the theater.
Should we talk about the stampede?
Let's talk about that stampede.
The stampede, if you watch it close, you see the same people fleeing out of the theater multiple times.
There's like 2 or 3 angles of the crowd fleeing, and it's the
They
same
didn't have enough
people.
extras to make it look like a really big crowd. And if you look really close, a lot of them have big smiles on their faces, laughing and hooting like it's, they're having fun doing it.
Danny, Jane's brother, tries to shoot the monster with his toy cap gun and then runs into a diner. The blob covers the entire diner with Steve and it's gotten bigger, with
Yes.
Steve and several others inside. Dave calls and says they're going to drop a power line on the thing to kill it, but that has no effect. The power line starts a small fire in the diner, and Steve puts that out with a fire extinguisher.
One of them big, cold CO2 fire extinguishers.
The creature withdraws from the cold of the fire extinguisher. Oh, that's why it didn't get them in the cooler.
They put it together.
Dave tells the fireman and teenager to grab all the fire extinguishers in town and come back to fight the blob. With dozens of extinguishers, they guide the blob away from the diner, and everyone gets out unharmed. They freeze the thing solid, and then the army picks it up and dumps it in the Arctic, probably, hopefully, maybe, never to be seen again.
Uh-oh. We know that's not right.
Steve McQueen was nearly 30 when he made this, and yeah, he looks it. The acting and dialogue isn't particularly good from any of the cast, and the story itself is actually very predictable. Sounds kind of crappy put that way.
But
The thing is, the monster here is so good that it became an almost instant classic. It's just an amorphous blob of red goo, but it moves realistically, and it's completely alien. It wasn't a giant bug. It wasn't Frankenstein or Dracula. It wasn't an alien in a rubber mask.
it was a monster from space.
It was a real monster from space. Plus, it was in color, which was still kind of a novelty for 1958.
For horror films, yeah, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really very dated, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, it was. And we just saw the
We have
sequel.
seen all of them.
We saw the remake, and we just saw the sequel.
We'll talk about
We'll
the
talk about
1988
those.
remake next week, and we'll talk about the really awful, well, not that
Not
bad,
that awful.
1972
Son of the
sequel
Blob.
to this one.
Son of the Blob, or Beware the Blob.
Beware
Depends on-
of the
yeah.
Blob.
I think
yes.
I think Beware the Blob is what they've officially gone with now.
Yeah, I couldn't find much on Son of Blob. I think it's just Beware of. Well, anyway, then we watched a short film.
A really good one.
What was it?
Really good. Mob Ghost from 1920. 1922.
Not real Mob. This is recent.
2022, yes. Brand new. Directed by Jimmy Caputo. Written by Jimmy Caputo. Stars Paul Noonan, Mark Atkinson, Nick Albanese, and Jeff Blanchett. Runtime is 9 minutes.
Yeah, and of course, there's a show. You can watch it in the show notes.
There's
What
a
happens?
trailer. Not a trailer.
Not a trailer. You can watch the whole thing.
It says trailer here. That's a typo.
Oh, maybe I don't remember. Maybe this one is still in the film festival circuit, and we got a screener. I don't know.
Oh. So
I don't know.
so
It's pretty
a
short.
teaser.
It might be.
Oh.
Click on that link in the show notes and see what happens.
Wow.
What does happen?
A man sits alone, eating, and smells smoke. The stove in his kitchen has gone haywire. No, it's a ghost. Well, he calls a paranormal investigator who says that the ghost is an Italian crime boss, Polly the Butcher, who used to live there and died there. That explains the smell of pasta cooking, says the man. The expert works cheap. He just wants some weed and drugs and whatever there is to drink around the apartment. And never look for a exorcist on Craigslist. Don't go for the lowest bidder. 'Cause it's more humor than horror, but it is an exorcist story down deep, until it becomes The Sopranos, kind of.
Where's my gabagool?
It's really well shot, really well acted, and very funny, especially if you like Italian mobster films. And there may be worse things than living with a mob ghost, as poor George finds out at the end.
Finds out in the end.
It's a really good one. Yeah. But definitely funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we watched one that wasn't funny at all.
No, this was grim business.
Saloum, 2021. Directed by Jean-Luc Herbulot. Written by him and Pamela Diop. Stars Jan Gale, Eveline Iliuhen, I'm going to go with that, and Roger Sala. Yeah, I can say that one.
Yes.
Hour and 24 minutes. Trailer in the show notes. It's a fairly recent one. You probably haven't seen it. It is available on Shudder. Spoiler free. What happens?
Great acting, great story, and beautiful cinematography. And it doesn't make Africa look like a fun place to live or visit.
I ain't never going to Africa.
Yeah, well, at least the parts they show us here. But it was a treat seeing it. African horror movies actually made by Africans with a mostly African cast. That's a rarity.
Maybe the only one I've seen.
Yeah. And this one is a gem. It's worth viewing for sure.
All right, well, here we go with the spoilers. I probably will stop most of the way through. We'll stop at some point, because probably nobody's seen this one yet.
Probably not a lot, and everybody should.
We say that revenge is like a river whose bottom is reached only when we drown. It's the opening quote. We begin in Guinea-Bissau in 2003. A large number of soldiers and civilians are killed by men who leave calling cards all over the place. Their pledge to restore order looks like bloodshed, but they're working against the drug trade. The main trio are guns for hire, with another guy who's pulled along. There's lots of shooting as the men take their gold payment and fly away. We move to Bari, Gambia, where something goes wrong with the men's plane. They make for Saloum, Senegal, instead of Dakar, where they were supposed to drop off Felix. Credits roll.
He's the guy they dragged along.
Lots of action, lots of shooting.
That's quite a frenetic opening sequence there.
Yeah. After landing the plane in the desert, the men bury their gold and make a note with the GPS coordinates. The men figure out their plane was sabotaged before they even took off. Well, it's an 8-hour walk to get repair stuff and more fuel. And at one point in their journey, Chaka is given a drug to knock him out, and he has a nightmare. We wondered what that was all about, and later on it's explained that he's afraid to ride in a boat because of an extreme water phobia, so he chose to be sedated for the journey. Not quite as nefarious as we'd thought.
And luckily one of the guys has knockout powder along with him.
One of the guys is like an Indian shaman or voodoo. What do you call those guys in Africa? Witch doctor? I'm not sure what
I think witch doctor is probably an archaic and
Yeah.
probably insulting term. Shaman.
Okay.
I think shaman would be appropriate.
He's the magic dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's magic plus, pharmaceuticals. He's got powders and potions and things that do real things. There's no doubt that the things he's
the
administering
medicine man.
are working. Yeah.
Well-
Plus there's mysticism too.
Yeah.
That may or may not be real.
Oh, it's real.
Well, it turns out, as a matter of fact, that it is.
They come to the Baobab, a place where people will forget about them if they just stay a few days. The little motel kind of place there suddenly has 2 open rooms, so they stay there. Well, they make open rooms. There's no charges for food and drink and lodging, but it's a place where everyone has to do field work or chores every day to pay. The white-haired man, Papa Minuet, is a sort of a shaman who puts the white-beard man, Rafa, into a trance and says that there are eyes upon them. And we don't get anybody's names until almost the end of the film. So I got a lot of white-beard man and shaman man and all that too.
White Mohawk man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all look very distinctive, but we're not told
their
names.
hairstyles are distinctive, so that's what we went with.
At dinner that night, the 4 men meet Yusei and Sephira, a pair of artists who are also visiting the region. Awa, the deaf-mute, is another guest, and Salamane is Omar, the host's assistant. Lots of people here.
Mm-hmm.
Chaka doesn't take his gloves off at dinner. We see that he's kind of strange. We see that Awa can read lips, and she knows quite a bit about them already. The trio knows sign language, and at dinner she says she's coming with them going forward, or she's going to expose who they really are. Felix, he's like a drug cartel guy that they're taking sort of as a prisoner, sort of a hostage kind of guy. What was his deal?
They're going to get a nice juicy payment upon delivery.
Yeah, take him to this place and get paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, Felix doesn't speak the language, so he just sort of follows along and does what he's told. And then Captain Suleiman of the police arrives, and the party breaks up. Hey, the cops are here, let's go.
Yeah.
The next morning, they're all assigned chores. Rafa and Awa are out on a boat, and she knows a lot more about the trio of men than she even let on last night. They're heroes in her eyes. As Papa Minuet delivers goods to the town, We see people running around behind him, and he notices that many of the men's ears are sealed shut.
Yeah.
That's weird looking.
There's general weirdness in this little village.
Chaka and Omar go out with guns to stop some fishing poachers. It's like BB guns. They shoot them in the butt and they run them off. Nobody dies. Felix ends up planting mangroves in the field, but Suleiman says that he knows that the cartel has put a price on Felix's head. He's a smart guy who has put together who the trio really are, and he wants Felix to help keep them distracted so he can bring in the cops to deal with them. Or else. We get several blurry, dreamlike shots of people chained up in a barn. It's some kind of vision that Chaka has of his own childhood, we think. Later at dinner, he accuses Omar of hurting the child in his dreams. Omar admits it, and then Chaka kills him. He's the host.
Yeah, that I did not see that coming.
I did not see that coming.
That escalates really quickly.
Omar kept Chaka as a child slave decades ago, but he escaped. Captain Suleiman calls for backup, but Chaka has already paid off the cops to leave. He was on to Omar the whole time. Suleiman is on his own. Minuet and Rafa accuse Chaka of bringing them here on purpose. This was all planned by Chaka, and they weren't in on it.
Seems that way, but maybe we should
should stop right there, yes.
Things get weirder from there.
Turns out that was just the beginning of the
and we haven't even gotten into the really supernatural
the weird stuff yet. All right, well, commentary-wise, Africa does not look like a very fun place to visit, even before the monsters show up.
Now, I realize that there's nice places in Africa. There's oases and forests and civilized cities and, beautiful buildings, and this doesn't show any of those.
No,
this just shows the worst.
This is the worst.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Dusty and gritty and sweaty and poor and, not fun.
Yeah. I would love to have a suitcase, though, with an almost specter, kind of like Hydra logo on the side. It was very cool.
That was cool.
They get paid in gold in the beginning, and they got the suitcase with the little octopus thing on it, and Kevin's like, isn't that Hydra? I'm like, no, it's Spectre.
Not quite.
And we had to look at both of them.
Like either one.
It's not quite either, but it's close. Well, the weird swarm creature is well done and interesting. Kind of cohesive clouds of insects, which reminded me an awful lot of the smoke monster from Lost.
Yeah, the effect was very similar.
Not the same exactly, but very close.
Something like that, yeah.
Anyway, it's a good story of a complex revenge plot and a surprise that no one expected.
You got to see this one.
And that one's on Shudder. Yeah. And then we watched The Retaliators, a new release, finished in 2021, just coming to video now.
Brand spanking new.
Directed by Samuel Gonzalez Jr., Michael Lombardi, and Bridget Smith. Written by Darren Gear and Jeff Allen Gear. Stars Michael Lombardi, Mark Menchaca, and Joseph Gatt. Hour 37 minutes. Trailer in the show notes. Spoiler-free. What was expected to be a pretty standard revenge flick turned out to be something pretty special. You can say that about the previous one as well.
Yes.
This has a strong cast, excellent effects, and a good story. Kevin says it's not strictly horror, but it does the job nicely.
Okay.
I thought it was starting out kind of thriller-ish, but it went horror pretty well into it. Yeah, I'd say it's definitely horror.
It probably falls over the fence onto the horror side, yeah.
All right,
okay, well, I admit it, yeah.
And again, we'll stop before we give away all the good stuff, but what's it about? What happens?
Well, we begin with a voiceover talking about justice and evil. Maybe sometimes it's better to keep evil alive. And as credits roll, we watch a man throw a body down a well.
Well, there's one that's not alive.
Yeah. Near Hillsdale, New Jersey, a couple of girls are trying to figure out a paper map. And naturally, they turn down a private road and get a flat tire.
Nobody can read a map anymore. It's all GPS.
Someone grabs Erica and drags her off into the woods. The other girl gets a scare as a bunch of crazy-acting people close in.
A zombie apocalypse?
No, a guy shows up yelling, "They aren't zombies," as he gets dragged away.
They look like zombies.
The doors slam on the van with the girl inside, and we see gore splashing on the insides of the windows. Well, in Stockbridge, New Jersey, a teen girl is in grief counseling group meeting. Sarah tells her story about something that happened when she was 10, and someone is watching from the outside of the room, which seemed a little ominous, but no, it's her dad. Pastor Bishop goes to buy a Christmas tree with his 2 daughters. We see that the eldest daughter is Sarah from the previous scene. The guy watching is the pastor, her father. And there's almost a fight over a tree. Well, sort of a fight, a shovey. And
That's my tree. No, that's my tree.
And that's Dante from Clerks. If you're a fan of the movie Clerks, that was that actor whose name I cannot think of. The guy that picked the fight with him.
I've never seen Clerks.
Okay.
I need to see that one of these decades.
Yeah. Well, the bishop backs off from the fight.
His name is Bishop. He's not a bishop.
Oh, right, yes. Well, later, Sarah rubs in what a wimp he is, but he says real life isn't like the action movies, and he's just, that's not him. Well, he incorporates the fight story into his Christmas Eve sermon. He talks about revenge on people who wrong us. And you can smell the death wish vibes on this guy that are coming.
He's Mr. Peaceful. He wouldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah.
You yell at him, you do the whole Karen routine on him, and he turns the other cheek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got something big coming.
Well, elsewhere, a man in a wheelchair rolls into a warehouse where he encounters a creepy bald-headed dude, Ram Katie. Ram Katie takes the drugs from the man in the wheelchair and kills him. Well, in the meantime, Sarah's off to a Christmas party, where she's told to come home by 11:30. And as she fills up the gas tank, Katie is there leering at her. Well, there's a thumping from his trunk. The man in the wheelchair wasn't quite so dead after all. And she knows something isn't right, and he knows that she knows. He tries to attack her, but she sprays him with pepper spray. She calls her dad because the guy's chasing her down the road in his car. Katie runs her off the road and zip ties her hands to the steering wheel. He then pushes her car into the lake. And when Bishop arrives a while later, he does not take it well. More, you think?
Yeah, we didn't. I didn't write a whole summary on this one.
Okay. Detective Jed Sawyer comes by to ask about Sarah's final phone call. Sawyer explains that it wasn't road rage. It was murder. Elsewhere, a cop pulls over Ram Katie, and the cop injects him with something.
What?
Yeah, that
That's
was pretty unexpected. Vic, Ram's brother, starts calling around looking for the missing goon. And at the same time, people are missing that guy in the wheelchair. John Bishop is still distraught, wants to go looking for his daughter's murderer. Detective Jed tells Bishop about a serial killer from 10 years back and his own personal experience with tragedy. Elsewhere, Ram Katie wakes up in a torture chamber. Otto, the opposing gang leader, declares war on Vic's gang because he thinks Ram stole the drugs and the money, and things devolve from there.
It all sounds like a kidnapping, kind of maybe a revenge story.
But it gets more complicated than that.
It does, yeah. Those aren't zombies. Probably the best line of the film.
Yes.
From watching the trailer, we had doubts that this even qualified as a horror film. Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It looks good and has good pacing and cinematography. The dialogue is a bit weak in places. You get a little flavor of indie film in there. But it's completely acceptable. The overall story is very good. I really didn't care for the music selections. But since the members of Five Finger Death Punch, Papa Roach, and Tommy Lee were actually among the cast, I guess the soundtrack was kind of preordained. Kevin, on the other hand, loved the music and thought it was awesome seeing all those people from the music industry in this.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Okay.
Five Finger Death Punch is just awesome.
The synopsis above make this sound like a typical Death Wish revenge thriller film, but it eventually goes well over the line into horror. Keep in mind it takes a while to get there, but the payoff is worth the wait. The gore shots are wonderfully excessive and look pretty realistic, and we both liked it a lot more than we thought we were going into this one.
Yeah, I'm really glad we watched this one.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so
and that's about the show, isn't it?
That's it for this week. Tune in next week when we'll have 4 more movies and a short.
What do you reckon was your favorite this week?
Oh,
I'm kind of. I think I'm going to go with Retaliators as my favorite. Saloum as a second.
I'm going to go with Saloum. I think Saloum. I'm not sure.
It's a tough choice between those two because they were both really, really good.
Yeah,
and both.
Well, they were all good.
Both of them were better than I expected, which is always pleasant.
Yes,
always enjoyable.
Yeah, the trailer on Saloum didn't really look like that much either.
And the Blob and the wax museum, I'd kind of put equal to. They were both good, classic, oldies. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do we got next week?
I don't know.
I do.
I don't have that in front of me.
Let me bring it up here in a second.
I know some of the movies we've seen.
Next week, we will look at the Snowtown Murders.
Oh, yeah.
Based on a true story.
That was one that I saw recommended, and yeah, they were right.
The Blob from 1988. This is the remake, not the sequel, the remake.
Right.
Extraordinary Tales, an animated Poe thing.
Cartoon.
And Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. There's a
Scary.
lot of woman, not a lot of 50-foot attacking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spoiler, we
Yeah.
thought that was kind of meh. 50 foot of meh.
And because of the weird way our electric works around here, we were a day late with one of those, so we ended up watching 2 shorts next week.
Yeah, we were in the middle of watching Extraordinary Tales, and suddenly everything went black.
So that one got pushed down to
the weather
Saturday.
was fine. It turned out there was a electrical work being done down the street.
Yeah. So next
anyway.
week, 4 movies and 2 shorts to make up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And we'll see you when?
Next week.
See ya.
See ya.